Welcome back, everybody. Well, since the early 60s, the state of Illinois has sent 4 governors to prison.
Corruption is not new to the land of Lincoln, so it lends itself to be the perfect backdrop for the suspense novel. It's The Governor's Wife by Michael Harvey, and Michael is here with us now. He's also the co-creator, writer, and executive producer of the TV series Cold Case Files. So we're welcoming you to the Yellow Couch.
Thank you.
Good to have you here again.
Oh, it's great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is exciting. A brand new book.
Yep.
How long has it taken you since your last installment of writing?
It was probably about a year.
About a year.
They try to put them out every year. But this one was an interesting one. I originally got the idea for this book when I was watching Rod Blagojevich actually get sentenced. I was watching him drive down the Edens, and you know, the media chop is following him down, and it's quite a show. And I was thinking, what if he got down to the federal building and they opened the back door of the car and he wasn't there? And he became kind of like the Whitey Bulger of Chicago. He was here, he was there, but he was nowhere. Yeah. And that was kind of like the beginning of the book. That was the first seed of the book. And I kind of put that aside for a while I was working on some other things, but eventually I came back to it.
I always wonder about authors like you who write incredible, you know, suspenseful, crime, corruption novels. And you have an interesting background. You have a law degree from Duke, journalism, a master's from Northwestern. Classical languages, a bachelor's degree from Holy Cross. But then you've also worked in reporting, investigative reporting. We talked about the Cold Case Files. Do you see yourself as sort of like a cop? I mean, because you kind of the crime part of it. What gives you that edge?
I mean, I think I look at myself as a storyteller, but I think that I know a lot about crime. I've interviewed a lot of cops. I've been to a lot of crime scenes. I've interviewed a lot of criminals. I've been in a lot of big-time prisons. I've been up on death row. Interviewed a lot of family members of victims. And so all of that stuff kind of stays with you. And there's an old saying that you write what you know. And that's a world that I know. I mean, I guess I could write a novel about the Russian ballet, but I wouldn't know if it was very authentic. I know what it's like at a crime scene. I know what it's like to talk to a family member that's lost, you know, a loved one. And so I know when I write whether it's real or not. And that's ultimately what you're looking for, is to be real and to be authentic. So when I started to write novels, I was still working at Cold Case Files, doing documentaries when I first wrote my first book, The Chicago Way. But the crime aspect of it just seemed like a natural fit for me. And certainly, you know, the stories themselves, the plot lines are fictional, but the atmospherics of the books are certainly informed by all the stuff that I've done in the real world.
Well, that's what I kind of wonder. Yeah, how much do you have to glamorize it, and have you used parts from here, parts from there, little things that maybe were real, incorporated to make this fictional situation? You
use little. It's more the atmospherics. I don't usually use specific storylines.
Out of respect?
Out of respect? No, I have plenty of storylines going through my head. So I guess I just don't feel like I need them. You know, once the characters walk out onto the page, I don't outline anything. So I don't know where the book is going. But once the characters walk out onto the page, they just take it wherever they're going to go. So the storyline's going to go where it's going to go, and it's going to be driven by the characters. But the atmospherics are all going to be informed by real life. And occasionally you'll get some real life things. In my first novel, I had a character that was loosely based on John Wayne Gacy. I interviewed John Wayne Gacy, the serial killer, as one of my very first interviews when I first started working as a journalist. And there was a character in that book that's loosely based on John. But for the most part, I try to stay away from the real stuff and just...
Well, and you get a lot of good material. I think being the owner of a bar, you own the Hidden Shamrock in Chicago, which gives you good material, I would think, too. But I interviewed somebody once on death row when I was in Texas and reporting, One-Eyed Willie, who eventually was killed. What have you learned specifically from talking to criminals? Is there anything kind of overall that you've taken from it?
Well, from serial killers, I would say... because that's what most people are interested in. You know, just a huge, unsurpassing ego. I mean, they're just completely consumed with themselves from
like
beginning
to end.
Yeah, but pathologically narcissistic, and that's what you see over and over again. They tend to dehumanize their victims, so they'll talk about. You know, a victim as it, like using the pronoun it instead of he or she, things like that, and they're just really consumed with themselves. So when you're interviewing them, you understand that and you play to that. I can tell you, I'll tell you a couple stories about Gacy, for example. That'll give you a good idea into Gacy. he had never done an interview before, and this was the first on-camera interview he did. And it was a situation where I'd written him a letter, and then we had talked on the phone. And I was just starting out in the journalism business, but we talked on the phone for a long time. And finally, he agreed to do the interview. So I go up to Menard, to Death Row, and he comes down, and he's got like two guards are carrying like stacks of dossiers on all the victims. And he said he was researching the victims to find out who really did it. What he was really doing was he wanted to relive the crimes by researching each of these kids that he had killed. But he comes down, and the first thing he says to me, and he's got guards on either side of him with shotguns, the first thing he says to me is, you look like a lot of the victims. And that's his way.
It's a way to freak you out a little.
It's a way to try to exert control in the interview. That was the first thing he says. And I said, well, John, you got two guys on either side of you with shotguns, and you claim you didn't do it anyway, so I guess I don't have anything to worry about. But he's constantly trying to assert himself. Right. And then
down here.
And the second thing, I can tell you
Did
lots
you
of
get that
things.
pit in your stomach though a little bit? Did it creep you out?
I had talked to him enough on the phone where I knew he was going to do stuff like that. But sure, you're just like, okay. I had a lot of
evil man.
Yeah. You as a journalist, you have a lot of things on your mind. So I was just like, okay, John, great. You're trying to do your thing. Let's just move on.
Yeah.
But the second thing, I could tell you lots of things about John. But the second thing is, did the interview, and then a few months later, it's around Christmas time, and I get onto the mailbox, and there's a Christmas card there from John Gacy, and it's the thing is J.W. Gacy, Lockbox 711, Menard, Illinois, and my first thought was, wow, I have to get a new job. I really have to get new friends, and because this is really not working out.
Happy holidays. May Christ be with you.
Right. But the second thing is that so I open the card, and it just says it's just a little card, and it's just scribbled J.W. Gacy, and he signed it. But on the back, you flip it over, and I'm from Boston originally, if you can't tell by the accent. Yeah. And so the back of the card, it says, the person who sent you this is a friend of the Floating Children's Hospital of Boston. Okay, and he killed 33 kids. And so he loves the double entendre. He loves all of these things. He continually did that throughout the interview and throughout my conversations with him, and this was just another example of that. He loves knowing I'm from Boston, knowing it was from the Children's Hospital of Boston, and he's in jail for killing 33 kids. So that's Gacy, and it's all about Gacy. And any serial killer like that, it's all about them. Everything has to go back to them and feed back to them, because that's what they live for.
He almost finds humor in it.
He does find humor in it. He was
disgusting.
He was he was a clown, and he worked for Bressler's ice cream, and they were the 33 flavors, and he had a big joke about that. So he'd constantly be doing all this stuff, and that's just the nature of that kind of a killer. Now there are a lot of different kinds of killers, but serial killer that's just the way they're wired.
Well, and people are fascinated by it, because I think most people who are normal, so to speak, can't imagine ever doing something like that.
Right.
So they're fascinated by what turns a person into someone who stalks and kills multiple people.
Well, the inhuman nature of it. I mean, it's just so cold and pathological. And again, I think what I find is that besides the ego part of it and the power and the control, they want power and control over their victims. They want to revisit their victims if they can. If they can go to visit the grave sites, they will, or they'll in their cell they will go over, the personal details of the people they've killed, and that's just the way they are. There's not much more you can say. It's kind of a I don't know. It's just an endless loop for them of just constantly coming back to themselves in a very very sick sort of way, very twisted sort of way.
Do you have plans to turn your book into a show? Do you have those kinds of ideas of using those sorts of storylines within the shows that you already have?
Well, I mean, interesting you ask. Not this book, but I have another book that I just finished. You write them like a year ahead. So I had a book.
So not published yet?
Not published yet, right. But it'll be out next summer, and it's called Brighton, and that's the working title. And it's set in Boston, where I grew up.
Okay.
And we just signed a movie deal for that with Graham King, who's the producer of The Departed and The Town. And he's done some really great stuff with Boston crime thrillers. And so we're really excited about that deal, and hopefully that will make its way into perhaps a movie.
That's awesome.
Fantastic.
We love it when you're here.
You'll come back?
I will come back for sure.
Yeah, and this book, we didn't talk a whole lot about it. We had a great conversation, but this is called The Governor's Wife, a fascinating thriller. It takes place in Chicago. It's about a corrupt politician and his wife, who also has some secrets that are very fascinating. Yes. And this is, again, a return to the Michael Kelly series. You can find out more, too, by visiting Michael's website. So what you need to do is go to michaelharveybooks.com. You'll have to come back, then, about your next book
Thank
and
you
the
very
movie.
much. I certainly will. And this is my favorite Kelly book, so people, I think if they buy it, they'll love it.
Wonderful.
Okay,
thank you so much. Great to see you again.
Thanks for being here.